A lot of people fell in love with Earthworm Jim for his wacky, abstract humour that totally goes on to define his character. Those crazy in-game antics, the memorable characters, and just the general craziness of the Earthworm Jim games make them some of the most beloved platforming to come out of the 16-bit era. But if there's one thing that we absolutely hate on the Leftover Culture review, it's being outshone by far funnier, far more interesting material. I've said in the past that I wasn't going to review Earthworm Jim 3D. I'm not sure if the world was ready. Maybe I wasn't ready. I certainly gave it a go, but it was kind of hard to come back to. So the 3D platformer wasn't really doing Earthworm Jim any favours. What I didn't realise was there was also a 2D platformer being released for the Game Boy Color. Earthworm Jim, Menace to the Galaxy.
The Leftover Culture Review.
Come, entrant! The secret for summoning the fiend shall be mine. Know it! Things I go through just to destroy the universe.
Earthworm Jim, Menace to the Galaxy usually gets a footnote as one of the less desirable Earthworm Jim games. An undesirable entry that tries to ride the Earthworm Jim name without providing any of that charm, humour, or that solid platforming that made the original game stand out against some very stiff competition. The simple answer is that the original development team, they went on to bigger and better things like Wild 9 and the Neverhood. Earthworm Jim 3D was stuck in development hell for years, which meant that the cartoon series it was based on was already wrapped up. Momentum was slowing down, and honestly, this game is nowhere near strong enough to relaunch the Earthworm Jim name on its own. Alright, so talking about Earthworm Jim 3D has been a total blast, but the reason you're probably here, you want to hear about Menace to the Galaxy. We have a game based off the cartoon characters years after the show finished. The main reason for Menace to the Galaxy was to simultaneously bring a new game to the Game Boy alongside the Earthworm Jim 3D release. So to access the entire game, you'll want access to one of these, a Game Boy Color at the very least, because it turns out there's one hidden stage that's just a little bit too hardcore for the Game Boy's monochrome screen. But for the majority of you, there's a good chance you won't be hanging around long enough to enjoy it. So just like Earthworm Jim 3D, the goal is collecting all these things. Coins, I think. If you die once, you start again. It's a brutal world for an earthworm, and just a frustrating one for the gamer. I'm pretty confident that's easily the first hurdle here. It's generic looking and kind of bland, but you know, it's nothing terrible. You start out in a city. I've got no idea why, but by the time you're at the lab, facing your first enemies and stage obstacles, you might actually die. When it comes down to playing a bland, generic stage for the second time round, and then the third, and then the fourth time, it will take its toll on even the biggest Earthworm Jim fans. Even if you can keep Jim alive, you still need to collect all the coins, and that's the goal here. Miss one, and you'll be backtracking for it. So, while you're checking out these stages, it starts to feel like this was supposed to be a different game that's just had Earthworm Jim sprites slapped on top of it. Obviously the original game had some pretty wacky stages, but levels like Graveyard will take Jim to a graveyard to blast zombies. It's actually a little bit disappointing when you consider that rich universe that Earthworm Jim comes from. Even though those generic elements are just so well ingrained, every so often you see something and you'll be like, hey, maybe this could actually be an Earthworm Jim game. I'm starting to hope it gets better, which it doesn't get much better, but these small little throws to the original series at least kept me a little bit captivated as a fan. And then, you've got to deal with things like the crazy perspective. It is going to be super easy picking apart a game like Menace to the Galaxy. It's a bare bones platformer without much of the charm, but every so often, even I had to stop and admire the crazy perspectives. Obviously there's stages like the bedroom and the sweet shop, where Jim seems miniaturized, and we've seen that happen in previous Earthworm Jim games too. Where it gets a little bit wonky is when you need to go up against Bob the Killer Goldfish for the first boss fight. That's one really big fish. And yeah, it's a full-fledged boss fight. This and Earthworm Jim 3D finally gave Bob the chance to fight back. And where Earthworm Jim 3D had every boss fight contained to a pig surfing arena, at least Bob here has a laboratory and his trademark fishbowl. And maybe I'm giving the boss fights too much credit in Menace to the Galaxy. But they were kind of the highlight for me. Between the long, irritating stages, they're short and straightforward, playing out on a single screen, actually using Earthworm Jim to cause some major damage instead of just collecting junk. It's also the only Earthworm Jim game to have Evil Jim as an enemy. A character that was created for the cartoon series. He matches Jim's skill in every regard, the perfect opponent, and he might have been a cool boss if he wasn't such a pushover. Actually, all the bosses are super easy. It's nice that they put the thought into creating a unique boss battle each time, but don't expect to spend too long fighting any of them. If you do decide to punish yourself by getting through this game, you might actually appreciate the briefness. You can slog around those stages looking for one elusive coin, but the boss fights here are quick and punchy. And it was actually really nice to do some fighting and killing. The enemies in this game are actually pretty scattered out and harmless, which is a bit of a shame because they are really fun to kill, and you get an awesome selection of weapons to do it with. So obviously, they did ditch Earthworm Jim's head whip, which is a bit of a faux pas for an Earthworm Jim game. But since this is a handheld and the Game Boy's only got 2 buttons, I didn't mind it too much. Some of the other Earthworm Jim handheld games tried really hard to get that head whip in there, with the risk of making the control scheme a little bit too complicated. On top of the weapons, you can also get Snot and the Pocket Rocket power-ups. The rocket lets you fly around the stage, quickly collecting the coins and laying waste to the enemies. It is a really nice power-up that lets you skip a lot of the platforming. Whereas Snot, he kind of adds to it because all he gives you is a better bounce. So, is Earthworm Jim, Menace to the Galaxy, actually worth picking up? If you're a collector of Earthworm Jim gear, well, yeah, maybe. As it stands now, this is Earthworm Jim's last 2D platform. If you actually intend on playing the game though, just be warned, you probably won't find that much to really enjoy here. The Earthworm Jim ports for the Game Boy, Game Gear, and even the Game Boy Advance don't really stack up to the originals on the home console. Menace to the Galaxy is a Game Boy original, so I guess that means there's no better way to play this game. And it's not a broken mess. The passwords all worked. I didn't get stuck anywhere in the game. And using toilets as a way to transport around the stages certainly made backtracking easier. But seriously, the cheap deaths and the fact you need to backtrack it all really break up the flow of this nearly bearable Game Boy game. So yeah, if you're after a good Earthworm Jim fix, number 2 gets the Bruiser Certified Seal of Approval, just because it rounds out the whole Earthworm Jim experience for me. It's not just more of the same. You can't look back and say, man, they really squandered it. Here, Shiny gave it their all to make a fun, unique experience for an Earthworm with a robotic suit from space.